So welcome everybody to our Gita Gyan Day 8. So we will begin with the dedication of this presentation to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So let us say this prayer together to invoke auspiciousness and the blessings of the Parampara. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Mai, Jai Sri Sri Nitai Sundar Gaura Hari, and Jai Sri Sri Radha Gokulananda. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vigna Vinasha Narasimha Iti Namini Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langa Itim Girim Yat Kripadamaham Vande Sri Guru Dinatharinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanyamishwaram Om Tat Sat. So let us begin by glorification of the Gita. So we have already completed the 7 verses of the Gita Mahatmya by Sripad Sankaracharya. But that is not the only set of glorifications of the Bhagavad Gita. There are others as well. There is also the Gita Mahatmya from the Padma Purana, where Lord Shiva speaks to Parvati about the Bhagavad Gita, about the glories of each chapter. So there he gives a story also for each chapter. And so that's one. But today we will talk about, but that's very long. So today there's another Gita Mahatmya. This one is from the Sri Vaishnaviya Tantra Sara. So there are many verses. This one, there are not just 7. There are at least about 100 verses in glorification of the Bhagavad Gita. So we will pick today's verse. Gitaya Pushtakam Yatra Nitya Patascha Vartate Tatra Sarvani Tirtani Prayagadini Bhutale. So if you see this picture is Prayag, Deva Prayag. If you know about Kumbh Mela, you know where Kumbh Mela takes place? It is in the confluence of 3 rivers, the Ganga, the Yamuna, and the Saraswati. Now the Saraswati river, it's already extinct, at least it doesn't flow on the ground. So it flows underground. It has gone underground and it flows. But in previous times, the Saraswati, Ganga, and the Yamuna, all 3 used to meet at this place called Deva Prayag. Prayag. So now, I mean, later when the Muslims invaded India, they renamed the city from Prayag to Allahabad. So today it's still called Allahabad, but the old name of Prayag is still common. People still refer to it as Prayag. And this is where they have the confluence. You can see the gray water, the muddy, slightly muddy water is the Ganga, and the greenish dark colored water is the Yamuna. So they mix together and they continue to flow down. So the meaning of this verse is all the holy places in this universe, such as Prayag, are eternally present wherever the Gita the eternal book of divine song is present. So therefore, we don't have to go to Kumbh Mela and take bath in the confluence of the Prayag during Kumbh Mela. It's said here by the power of this verse that if you have the Gita at home and if we read from the Gita, it's considered the type of benefits we get from all the holy places in the universe, such as Prayag, are eternally present within the Gita. So such is the glory of the Bhagavad Gita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the Gita is a very interesting subject matter because it talks about many things. In the tomorrow, we will speak about the 5 things which the Gita speak about. So one of the things is it talks about us, Jiva. And another thing it talks about is the Supreme Lord, Bhagavad. So Jiva, Ishvara. These 2 things are 2 of the 5 things which Krishna will talk about in the Bhagavad Gita. And between the Jiva, all of us, and between our Creator, the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, or Bhagavan, or Ishvara, what is the relationship we have? So that knowledge which gives us that relationship is called Sambandha Jnana, the knowledge of a relationship, Sambandha. So, in Tamil also we say, Yanako Wanako Enna Sambandham. So, Sambandha means relationship. So, what is our relationship with God? So, understanding that is what Bhagavad Gita is predominantly all about. Those are the 2 of the things. And the main thing which connects us to God or to Krishna is what is called yoga. So if you remember, we talked about how yoga has 2 paths, right? One is called the Jnana path and one is called the Bhakti path. Now the Bhakti path, the Sanskrit term for it is Pushti Marg or Bhakti Marga. Bhakti Marga means the path, or Pushti Marga. It's also called Pushti Marg because it means the path of surrender. And then it's also called the path of action. So 2 paths. And if you look at the Jnana path, the first level, the first stage is what we call Karma Yoga. So we already know about Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga means we execute our duty. We don't run away from our duty, right? And then we do it not for the sake of gain or loss. We do it for the sake of duty. So that is Karma Yoga, without expecting the fruits. So then in Gita 5.5, Krishna says, one who knows that the position reached by means of Jnana Yoga can also be attained by devotional service. So this Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, all this can also be attained. If you remember from chapter 2 also, Krishna kept telling Arjuna, in the end, the perfection of Karma Yoga is to come to the Bhakti path, to dedicate all your efforts for not just for the sake of duty, but for the sake of pleasing the Supreme Lord, pleasing God. So therefore, in the Bhakti path, we have what we call the Bhakti Yoga. Now, this Bhakti Yoga, it has 9 different processes. So we will talk about this today towards the end. It's called Navavida Bhakti. Navavida means 9. Nava is 9. Navavida, Vida means different types. 9 processes of Bhakti. So one who's practicing Karma Yoga, right? So in 5.2, Krishna says, but of the 2, between the Jnana path and between the Bhakti path, Krishna is recommending devotional service is better than renunciation of work. So he says, better to do Bhakti rather than to do Karma Yoga. So he is telling Arjuna to take the other path, the Bhakti path. So at this point, some people who are following the Jnana path, if they accept this statement, then and they are convinced, then they will change to the Bhakti path. So from Karma Yoga, they will now become devotees, Bhakti. But there may be some people who may not know about this, or they may not be very convinced. So Krishna gives them still an option. From Karma Yoga, once they perfect the perfect Karma Yoga on how to do activities without any expectation, so that will bring them knowledge. So that will eventually give them realizations about how the nature of this material world is. So it will make them very wise. So when they become wise, then they will understand, they would want to know more about the nature of the spirit and the nature of the world. Because simply doing duty has nothing to do with spirit. So they would want to know more. So therefore, they will come to the level of Jnana Yoga. So once they do Jnana Yoga, right? So in Gita 5.5, as I mentioned here, one who knows the position reached by means of Jnana Yoga can also be attained by devotional service. So whatever that we attain from Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga process also, we will receive the same thing by following the 9 processes of Bhakti. So, but Jnana Yoga is the path where it's called the path of inaction. Because once they have taken this Jnana Yoga, they would want to dedicate their full time into studying the scriptures. So they won't have time because we have, so many scriptures, 108 Upanishads. They would want to go, they will accept a guru, they will become a brahmachari, they will become a sannyasi, and then they will dedicate themselves fully into this. So just study, right? And eventually they will take up the path of meditation. So it's called the path of inaction. So the person who has mastered Jnana Yoga, he will become liberated. So liberation means he is free from the cycle of birth and death. He becomes free of the material miseries, the threefold material miseries, Adi Atmika, Adi Bhautika, Adi Devika. So like that, he becomes free. So this is called the attainment of Brahman. So from understanding knowledge, he begins to see that I am spirit, you are spirit, everything is spirit. Even the whole world is actually a transformation of spirit only. So therefore, he sees everything as Brahman. So everything is divine. He starts seeing with that vision. Everything is divine. So that is called Brahman realization. The first realization of God, the first level, which we discussed yesterday. But this Brahman realization, just like this verse says, is also attainable from the devotee level. So here, this verse from chapter 6:29, Krishna says, intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. Why? Because this jnana path is very difficult. It's not easy. There's a lot of do's and don'ts, and we have to, dedicate our life. In Kali Yuga, practically 99.9% of the population cannot do it. So then Krishna says, but those who are doing devotional service, they are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. So they know the full scope about spiritual activities. So therefore, they are to be considered as Brahman also. So same, even by devotional service, you attain this. So understanding this, those who are jnana yogis, after understanding the full knowledge about spirit, they will start to understand bhakti is wonderful. So therefore, they may switch from jnana yoga, they may switch to bhakti yoga. So then they may follow from this point. Example of such people, if you remember the 4 Kumaras, the Sanat Kumaras, so they were already jnanis. They understood everything from Brahma. But after they met Lord Vishnu and they got attracted to his lotus feet, then they switched to bhakti. So these are examples of such people. And then they will attain even higher realization. But there are some people who may not have this information, or they may not be convinced, or they don't want to. Why they don't want to? We will explore that question in later chapters. So, and hence, therefore, the necessity for this path also, because not everybody would want to take the bhakti path. So for these people, Krishna from Jnana Yoga, these people become elevated. And after understanding the goal of knowledge, everything, then they will think, okay, let me search. They will start to understand that there is a supreme creator, that there is a supreme personality. And they will start searching for this supreme personality by meditation. internally. So they would have heard about something called Paramatma. So how to discover this Paramatma? This process of Dhyana Yoga. This is what we discussed yesterday. So Dhyana Yoga is the process of meditation, also called the Ashtanga Yoga. So at the end of this Dhyana Yoga, they will attain Paramatma realization. Now, Paramatma realization is even greater than Brahman realization. They will understand that this source of this Brahma Jyoti is actually coming from the Supreme Lord. And this Supreme Lord has a form. He's not formless. And this Supreme Lord, I am now able to witness within my own heart by the practice of meditation. By shutting out everything external, they search within, and then they are able to discover Paramatma seated next to us within the heart. So that as soon as they do that, then they are said to have achieved Paramatma realization, eternity and full of knowledge. So then what we can understand is, but Bhagavad Gita 6:22 to 23, Krishna says, and upon these dhyana yogis, and upon gaining this dhyana yogi, he thinks that there is nothing greater to gain. So, and Krishna says, but that's not true. That's something even higher. So after hearing this statement, the dhyana yogi, they may become a bhakti yogi. For example, a person who has been a dhyana yogi, example is Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra is one of the sages, and he practiced extreme dhyana yoga, and he became very powerful. But after coming in contact with Lord Ramachandra, then he immediately took up the process of bhakti. So like that, they may become a bhakta. And after all, there's another verse also, 647, Krishna says, and of all yogis, remember this verse, yoginam api sarvesham madgatinantar atmanaha. Right? And of all yogis, yoginam api sarvesham, of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So understanding this point from the scripture, dhyana yogis will eventually take up bhakti yoga. So the ultimate idea is for them to come to the highest level. This is step by step, stage by stage. So this is called the jnana path. And the highest realization is only available in the bhakti path. So that's why eventually it has to come to this point. And what is that highest realization? That highest realization is called Bhagavan realization. So this Bhagavan realization includes the Paramatma and includes the Brahman realization, both inside, both are all are within. So if you remember yesterday, Sat Chit Ananda, Bhagavan has eternity, all knowledge, all cognizance, and a form full of bliss, unending bliss, Ananda. So from here we can understand this is how Krishna has been addressing both paths in all these chapters so far. So he's been telling Arjuna about the jnana path, but at the same time he's also at the end of each chapter he's been telling how the jnana path can link to the bhakti path. So he's trying to tell Arjuna, don't go to the jnana path, try to follow the bhakti path. Okay, so we have let us quickly recap. Let us quickly recap chapter 7, which we covered yesterday. The topmost realization yoga. So because we have understood that Bhagavan realization is the topmost realization, so then these are some of the verses where Krishna establishes this clearly. Knowing God in full, the last word in yoga, and how rare it is for someone to to understand this point amongst many people. And then to further elaborate about what is this topmost realization, what is this Bhagavan all about? So then Krishna tells Arjuna, I am Bhagavan. And then he says, I am the source of everything, just like pearls are strung on a thread. You remember that verse? So like that, I hold everything. I'm in control of everything. No truth is superior to me. And then he begins to give analogies just for us to begin to even understand the glories of the Supreme Lord. He starts saying, I am the taste in water, I am the light in fire, I am the light in the sun and the moon. Like that, he starts telling different things to give us poetically for us to understand. And he also says he's the master of the three modes, the mode of passion, ignorance, and goodness. So then after that, he goes on to say, who are the people who cannot know me as Bhagavan? So remember the four types, the Chaturvida, the four types, and then the four types of people who cannot know, the grossly foolish, Mudas, and then the lowest of men, Naradama, and then the what do you call the Asura Bhavan, those who are extremely demonic in nature, and Maya Paharta Jnana, those whose knowledge is stolen by illusion. So these four people cannot approach the Supreme Lord. And then he goes on to talk about the four types of people who do approach the Supreme Lord. So the Arti, the one uh, who is actually suffering, who's going through miseries. So he will surrender to the Supreme Lord. And then the person who is looking for some kind of gain, someone who wants something. So therefore, example was what they call Gajendra was the one who was in misery. Like Dhruva Maharaj, he wanted to gain a kingdom. So therefore, he approached the Supreme Lord. The third type is those who are inquisitive, like the yogis of the Naimisaranya forest. And then the last one are the jnanis, those who are in knowledge. So these are the four who approach the Supreme Lord Bhagavan. And in this way, we talked about, and then the takeaway for yesterday was knowing Krishna is the last word in yoga. So he's the Bhagavan realization. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchitananda Vigraha, Anadiradir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam. He's the cause of everything, right? And he's the primeval, the oldest. Who can and cannot know Krishna? So with this we mentioned already. So now today we are going to chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme. And we will begin with the last verse of chapter 7, just to create the link. Now, in chapter 7, we didn't cover this last verse in chapter 7 yesterday, but I'd just like to mention it. This is basically, again, re-establishing that Krishna is the ultimate in self-realization, in God realization. Those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation, of the demigods, and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he says, even at the time of death. So he's trying to draw attention to Arjuna about the importance of the time of death, or importance of death. So this is what we will talk about in chapter 8. And chapter 8 is titled Attaining the Supreme. Now chapter 7 was called Knowledge of the Supreme. Knowledge of the Supreme. So we know knowledge, we know Bhagavan is the ultimate, but how do we attain this Bhagavan? So it's also called Akshara Brahma Yoga. So that means attaining the Supreme. Brahma is like the highest. It means the word Brahma means highest Akshara. So attaining this highest. So this verse, so in connection with that verse, from the time of death, it straight away links to 8.5. Antakale chamam eva smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nasti atra samsayaha. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. So actually, it's a very important point here that the time of death is actually very, very important. Why? Because whatever the person thinks at that moment of death, that is actually the deciding factor on what his next life is going to be about. So if one thinks of their wife, then it's in the scriptures, in other places, it said that they will somehow take the birth again and have some kind of relationship with that person. So the last thoughts are extremely important. So one may ask, is that a rule? Is this the rule for all living entities? That the last thought of that living entity determines the next birth. So you can see this picture. This picture is Bhishma Dev. Now Bhishma Dev, he had the blessing of Ichya Mrityu. That means he can choose when he dies. He can desire when he dies. Now he was defeated in battle and he was shot with thousands of arrows. And it seems so many arrows were shot on Bhishma Dev that when he fell, he couldn't touch the ground because the arrows were forming like a bed. So he just lied there on the battlefield in pain, but he didn't want to die yet. He didn't, because anyone who died in Kurukshetra, they will go to heaven. But he didn't just want to go to heaven because he came from heaven anyway. He was one of the heavenly persons in his previous life. He wanted to go back to the spiritual world. He wanted to go out of this material manifestation. So he actually waited. In fact, he waited for the next, he fell on the 5th day of the Mahabharata, and Mahabharata went on for, I think, I can't remember, 20 something days or 18 days, if I'm not mistaken. And then at the end of that, after certain things have happened, he was still lying there on the battlefield, waiting for death until Krishna came. So then this verse, Srimad Bhagavatam 1.9.24, Bhishma Dev is speaking. May my Lord, who is four-handed and whose beautifully decorated lotus face, with eyes as red as the rising sun, smiling, kindly await me at the moment when I quit this material body. So even Bhishma Dev, he was waiting for this. He wanted to see the Supreme Lord so that would be the last thing that he will see when he dies. So this is what saintly people all aspire for. All the devotees in the world, they want to aspire to remember God at the time of death. So this is the ultimate exam. So how can we remember God at the time of death? So the time of death is not something ordinary. It's something which one cannot cheat. It's not something one can mechanically set up. They will say at the time of death, I will somehow trick myself to remembering God. So this verse 8.6, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tad tyajati ante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state, bhava bhavitaha, whatever state of being one remembers, smaran. So whatever state of being one remembers, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So this is a rule after all. So Krishna is verifying this for us in this verse. A very important verse which we quote. So there are examples given in the Vedic scriptures in other places. One example is given about how the fly is the food of the frog. So when the frog catches the fly with its tongue, and the fly sees, the last thing the fly sees as the frog is about to eat the fly is that it's so scared of the frog. It's like, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. That it just thinks of the frog. So it's like a meditation of the fly thinking about the frog at the time of death. The fear is overwhelming. So what happens to the fly? In his next life, he becomes a frog. So that is the evolution of the consciousness of the spirit. So from one body to another body to another body. So like that, it takes different births. So similarly, the frog also, when it's being eaten by the snake, it is petrified with fear and remembering the snake at the time of death. So in its next life, it becomes a snake. And so in this way, it goes higher and higher and higher until it reaches the human body. So there's also an example in the scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam. It talks about a very great saint. So this saint, he's actually, India is called Bharat. So it's actually named after this person. This saint is called Bharata. He was a great king. And after he had his children, he wanted to give up his kingdom and take up spiritual life very seriously. So he took up the path of jnana path. He took the jnana path, right? And when he took the jnana path, he went alone to the forest and he did meditation and he worshipped. But he was also a devotee in a jnana path. And somehow he was doing, but it's a big story. But once he was meditating, he was doing worship, and then he saw that there was a deer which was being chased by a tiger across the river. And this deer, he was pregnant. This deer was pregnant and it crossed the river. He jumped across the river. And while it was jumping, out of fear for the tiger and out of exertion, the river was not near. It was a very far river, large river. So when he jumped, it somehow delivered its child. So the child, the baby deer, came out from this mother deer and it dropped into the river. And the mother deer also fell into the river, and the mother deer was pushed away by the current, and it would have died. Then this yogi's meditation or worship, he saw that this baby deer, oh, so what, I need to save this baby deer. So he went and saved the baby deer. And after saving the baby deer well and square, then he thought, somehow he became disturbed by this thought that, this baby deer is so cute. The baby deer is so alone. How is this baby deer going to survive without its mother? So therefore he thought that I will take care of this baby deer until it grows up. So in this way, he took care of it. And while he was doing this, his spiritual practice suffered a little, and he became trapped by Maya. He became enamored by the baby deer. He started to slowly become attached to the baby deer. And then one day he was walking, and then he fell in a hole. There was a trap hole in the forest, and then he broke his bones and he was about to die. And when he was about to die, he was so compassionate that the last thought, he already left everything. Everything was detached from him except this deer. And then he thought about this baby deer. The last thing he thought was, now that I'm going to die, how is this baby deer going to survive? So in that way he died. And in his next life, the Bhagavatam describes, he took the birth of a deer. But because of his spiritual merits, which he had done in that life, he remembered his past life. And he also carried forth all the merits from his past life. So as a deer, he didn't live like a normal deer. He was a very special deer. And in this way, he perfect slowly. He became, in his next life, he took back a human form. And in this time, he took the bhakti path. And then he attained the supreme abode. So therefore, it's very important. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So that's the reason it's very important that we need to prepare a conducive environment for the people who are dying. There should not be a situation where people are crying and so much of family attachment is there. So this is not conducive, because it will create desire for that person, anxiety for the person who is leaving. They might think of the parent, or they might think of the mother, or they might think of the child. So usually devotees, they will, the whole idea is the devotees remind them about Krishna. So when devotees pass away, usually they will play bhajan, Krishna bhajan, they will sing Krishna's names, they will be chanting, everybody will be sitting around and they will be chanting Hare Krishna very loudly, and in this way help the devotee to pass. So, but still, it's not so easy. It's not something which we can artificially create, because death is the examination and life is the preparation. So unless one lives one's life in consciousness of the Supreme, it's not possible to artificially think of the Supreme Lord at the time of death. So that's why people make their choices in life. So at a certain time, one should be more spiritually focused. But death may occur at any time. It's not necessarily that we may grow old and we may die. So Prahlad Maharaj, the boy devotee, he recommends that from the age of 5, one should take up spiritual life. One should not wait, because there is danger at every step. Anyway, that's a big topic. We will talk about that in level 2 in more detail. So yes, it's a rule. Whatever we think at the time of death, we will attain. So the idea is, by chanting Hare Krishna constantly throughout our life, so many rounds we chant every day, in that way one controls one's mind, and at the time of death automatically one is able to remember the Supreme Lord. If one dedicates one's life to the path of bhakti, when everything one does is for the sake of the Supreme Lord, for the pleasure of the Lord, one eats only the food offered by the Lord. So like that, one does so many things in relations to the Lord. At the time of death, it's said that one starts remembering it like a reel, like a video reel. Everything will pass by very quickly within that split second of death. And that time, one will remember the Supreme Lord. So that's the path of the bhakti. So this is the secret. This is the key on how to attain the Supreme. So Krishna says, a very important verse also, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anushmara yudhyacha mai arpita mano buddhir mam evaishyashi asamsayaha. Therefore, this verse is a very important verse because it outlines basically the concepts of Bhakti Yoga, what Bhakti Yoga is all about. So therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna. So that's the goal of Bhakti. So that's the idea behind the entire processes and activities of the Bhakti path. To always remember Krishna and to never forget Krishna in every step and every moment and every second of our life. And it's possible, it can be done. Many devotees have done it in the past. And at the same time, carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. So that doesn't mean one has to be a sannyasi. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, that doesn't mean you have to give up everything and go to the forest or become a sannyas. No. The Bhakti path is so beautiful that you can be a brahmachari, you can be a family man or a family woman, and you can also be a retired person, or you can be a sannyasi. In any of these 4 ashrams, you can attain the Supreme. So that's the Bhakti process. So therefore he says, carry out your prescribed duty and dedicate it to me. So that is the beginning of Bhakti Yoga, as we are doing it, and we go on doing it. And then he says, with your activities dedicated to me. So not just we do our normal duties, we also begin the practice of Bhakti Yoga. So the 9 different processes, Navavidha Bhakti, which we will talk about towards the end. And by these methods, and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, right? So this is more advanced. As we continue these stages, when we perform our duties and dedicate it to the Lord, when we practice our daily sadhana of bhakti process, then we will eventually come to the level where our mind and intelligence becomes fixed on the Supreme Lord. And in this way, at the time of death, you will attain me without doubt. So this is what Krishna says. And then we move on to 8:15. So then Krishna says, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion. So what's the benefit of attaining Krishna? So the Bhagavan realization is they never return to this temporary world. Now the problem with the Brahman realization and the Paramatma realization is like when it's like someone who are in prison, like we are in prison, for example. This material world is like a prison, right? When we come out of prison, if let's say we have someone who is a convict, a criminal, when he comes out of prison, unless he is engaged positively with society, what's going to happen to this person who escaped from prison? Because he doesn't know what else to do, he's free, he enjoys his freedom. But because he's not fixed in a higher purpose, therefore the great chance is again he will commit the same mistakes which he has committed. Again, he may go back to those same activities which brought him to prison in the first place. So this is the problem with Brahman and Paramatma realization. Paramatma is better, but with Brahman realization, it is just mukti. One is just free, moksha, mukti. That means it's just free from the miseries of material life. But there is no positive engagement to something even higher. So therefore, he remains in Brahman for a very, 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 very long time, even longer than the lifetime of Brahma. But because of inactivity, whereas the nature of the soul is to be active, and he doesn't know where else to go. So unless he's very fortunate, like the Jnana yogis who receive the blessings of either the Supreme Lord directly or the blessings of the devotees directly, they will again fall down into the material creation. So that's the problem. Whereas the devotees who are directly linked to the Bhagavan realization, they will never return to this temporary world. Why? Because they are attached to the seva of the Supreme Lord. That's all they want in life. They don't want anything further. They don't want anything else. So it might seem rather difficult for us to comprehend maybe at our stage. But as we go on, we see the scriptures, we read the scriptures, especially Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam will talk about so many devotees who all attain this state. So it is something attainable. And they never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries. So this material world is full of miseries because they have attained the highest perfection. So why is this material? So let's focus on this material world full of miseries. This material creation is called Dukkha Alayam Ashashvatam. I mentioned this previously last time also. So Dukkha Alayam. Alayam means a place of dukkha, misery. Ashashvatam, it is temporary. Nothing in this world remains, right? If you think we are happy, it's temporary. And if you think it's like that, it keeps changing. And therefore, it's a miserable place. It's also called Mrityor Loka, the place of death. Because every second or every microsecond, somebody or some creature or some living entity is dying in this material world. So, and therefore, we can understand that this is not the goal. So here's a picture of how Krishna receives the soul who has finally come back to his lotus feet in the spiritual world. So a very moving and touching description of this is given in one of the scriptures. It's called Brihad Bhagavatamrita, about the journey of the soul finally from the material world going back to God, and how he was so emotionally, wonderfully received by the Supreme Lord. So that is the purpose. So that's for another time we will discuss. So this world is full of miseries. What kind of miseries are this world full of? I've already mentioned some of them. There are the three types of kleshas, right? The three types of miseries we have heard: Adi Atmika, Adi Bautika, and Adi Devika. So there are there, and then there is, and Krishna says, Abrahma Bhuvana Loka, Punaravartino Arjuna, Mamupetyatu Kaunteya, Punarjanma na Vidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death takes place. So Krishna is saying this, not only this misery, this Adi Atmika, Adi Bautika, Adi Atmika, they are there not only in this material world, not only in Bhuloka. Now, this is the description of the entire material world creation. This is all material world, right? And Bhuloka is like a dimension. You know, it's like a dimension. So Bhuloka is where Earth planet is situated. It's one of the planets situated in Bhuloka dimension. Higher than Bhuloka is Bhuvarloka. Then higher than Bhuvarloka is Swargaloka. Then there's Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapoloka, and highest is Brahmaloka. This is where Lord Brahma lives. Swarga is where Lord Indra lives. So Mahar, Jana, and Tapo, these are like higher, greater beings, great sages, the Sapta Rishis, they all live in some of these places. And below Bhuloka is also another set of 7 planets, 7 dimensional systems. Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, like that Patala Loka. So these are all lower planetary systems. And they are not hell, they are greater than Bhuloka in terms of mysticism and enjoyment, but they are basically full of asuras or demonic people, people who are very, very more materialistic than the humans. So it's the dharma is not very much there. So, but at the bottom of the planet, at below Patala Loka, in Patala region, that is where hellish regions are. And there are thousands of planets of hellish region. So Krishna is saying from Brahma Loka all the way down to the hellish region, seven higher planetary systems and 7 lower planetary systems, and Bhuloka in the middle. So from the top to the bottom, this is all material world, material creation. This is called one universe. And there are multiple universes, like how we heard yesterday, multiple Brahmas in different universes. So it said that all of these are places of misery, and where repeated birth and death takes place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So where is Krishna's abode here? So Krishna's abode is not here, not within this. So this is material creation. Like that, there are many universes. So beyond material creation is what we call the spiritual sky, not material. So spiritual sky is called Paravyoma, or it is also called Vaikuntha Loka. Vaikuntha means beyond. And that is Vaikuntha. There is no place of suffering. So that is the destination of the spiritualist who has attained Bhagavan realization. So therefore, what are these other miseries other than the 3-fold kleshas that we've heard? There is also the 4 types of miseries which take place from Brahma Loka all the way down. So what are these 4? You can see from these pictures. Basically, it is Janma, Vyadi, Jara, and Mrityu. So Janma and Mrityu was mentioned here, right? Birth and death. Punarjanma ta vidyate, right? So like, therefore, it is a place of birth and death. Again and again, we take birth. So where there is birth, there will be, once birth is there, birth is not something very pleasant. There is no child which comes out happily laughing, right? Every child comes out half dead, practically speaking. Blue, black, hardly breathing, screaming. So, and the parent and the mother is also in extreme pain. So Janma is miserable. And Vyadi, after you take birth, the child is onslaught by all kinds of diseases, right? He gets possibilities of jaundice, flu, and then like nowadays COVID and things like that. So all kinds of diseases, and a lot throughout his life. No one can claim that they have never suffered from a disease. No dengue, malaria, AIDS. So then there is finally Jara. Jara, not finally. After that comes old age. And Jara means old age. So Jara brings its own set of miseries. Even when there are no diseases, life is not pleasant, right? Everything is painful, difficult to breathe, dim vision, the senses are all weakened, enjoyment is not so easy. And then finally, Mrityu, the time of death. It's described in the scriptures that Mrityu, the death, it happens within that instantaneous moment of time. And it's like as if the pain of death is like the sting of 1,000 scorpions. So you can imagine at the time of death, the three Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, mucus, bile, and the pranas, the air within our system, it will choke us. And in that time is very difficult to think, very difficult to breathe, very difficult to, it's extreme agony, that one split second. So you can imagine it's not easy at that time to remember the Supreme Lord. So an ordinary person cannot do it. Only a devotee can do this. One who has dedicated his life, at any point also, he can start. It takes only a moment to achieve this. So one who taken up the process, then they can remember the Supreme Lord by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. So then we will just quickly speak about the topics which is covered within this chapter 8. So 8.1 to 8.4, Arjuna asks some questions, some details, which we don't cover in this level 1. We will cover it in level 2. Basically, he talks about what is soul, what is what do you call material matter. So these are a bit technical. We will discuss this in level 2. So then Krishna goes straight about talking about attaining the Supreme. So why death is significant? Krishna Smaranam, that means that the Supreme is attained by remembering Krishna. Smaranam means remembering. Why we need to attain? So that we can be free from this Dukkalayam Ashashvatam, this place of misery, right, which is temporary. And our destination is Vaikuntha. So 820 to 822, the supreme abode is described. And further on, it goes on to talk about the two paths again. So Krishna again talks about the two paths. What happens to the person who is in the jnana path when he dies, and the person who in the bhakti path when he dies? So very quickly, we will just discuss. We won't go in detail, but we will talk about that in level 2 in detail. But now we will just quickly discuss what it means. So Krishna is basically saying that for the jnani path, those who are doing meditation and all that, an example is Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra is like he's the blind king, right? Remember from chapter 1, he's the blind king who's asking Sanjaya. Later on, when at the time of his death, after the Mahabharata war is over and everything, when he leaves his kingdom actually, and then he takes up the process of the jnana path. So despite hearing the Bhagavad Gita from Sanjaya's description, he could not accept the path of bhakti. Why? So we will discuss that later in another chapter. So he decided to take the jnana path, and he could do it because he was very passionate about it. And then, so Krishna describes the jnana path's departure. So at the time of departure, by the power of his meditation, he will spontaneously combust himself with flames. So it's said that in the Bhagavad Gita, such a person will leave the body in light and fire. So in that way, they will leave their body. So that's why even now in Hindu funerals, usually the body is burnt. So hoping that the person will leave in light and fire, but that's not the actual thing. It's even before they die, they will invoke that fire within themselves, and they will. It's called self-immolation. So it's not just by light and fire. That was not the only thing which the jnanis has to do, right? It also has to be at a proper time, muhurta. It has to be in a proper muhurta. So it cannot be just at a normal, it cannot be Rahu Kala, cannot be Yamagandam. It has to be a holy day, right? So Krishna, then Bhagavad Gita further, it describes, not only it has to be a proper muhurta, it has to be during the Shukla Paksha. Shukla Paksha means the waning, the waxing period of the moon. In Tamil, we say Valarpara. So the time when the moon is growing. So it has to be during that time. Then only the jnani's destination is Brahman. Otherwise, he will not attain. So so all this he has to plan. And not only it has to be Shukla Paksha, it has to be Uttaranayana. Uttaranayana means the time when the sun travels towards the northern region. We have during Pongal. Pongal is the time when the sun enters into the tropic of Capricorn, right? From Capricorn, it will travel towards Cancer. So this is the northern movement of the sun. So therefore, it's called Makara Sankranti, right? Makara means Capricorn. So the sun enters Makara Sankranti, and that's celebrated as Pongal. So it's the northern traveling time, and this is considered an auspicious time for yogis to leave their body. So all this has to be set, then only it will work for the dhyana yoga. So therefore, you can see this jnana path is very mechanical. It doesn't rely on anybody else. It relies only on one's own person, right? And in this way, they control themselves mechanically with various processes, and then eventually escape from this material misery. Whereas for the devotee, 827 Gita says, although the devotees know these two parts, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. So Krishna is telling, for the devotee, all this will not work. It's not necessary. The devotee can die between the southern period of the sun. It doesn't matter. Even in the dark period of the sun, even during Amavasya, the devotee can die. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's Muhurta or not. It doesn't matter the type of death, whether it's accident or disease or whatever. All it matters is they will remember the Supreme Lord. So the Lord personally takes care of it. So therefore, it says here, although the devotees know these two, the two parts I'm talking about is the path of death. They are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. Krishna's advice to Arjuna. So then, in 828, this verse comes. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results. So never think that someone who's taking devotional service would lose would any way be losing. So Krishna says he will get all the benefits of studying the Vedas. That means whatever the jnani gets, the devotee also attains simply by devotional service. Whatever the karmi gets by performing sacrifices, the devotee also will attain by the blessings of the Supreme Lord. By whatever austerities, like a dhyani, right? If he does austerities, the same benefits will also be attainable by the devotee. Even a normal karma kandi, giving charity or whatever it is, any good pious activities also, don't think that someone who is doing pure devotional service will not attain. They will automatically attain also. Pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities, all this will be attainable by a devotee. So this verse says that. So Krishna says, simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these. And at the time he reaches the supreme eternal abode. Just like how Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj took the path of devotion in the end, and he nevertheless attained all this. He got all that he wanted in his earlier desires, which he wanted to reject after he got bhakti. But the Supreme Lord still blessed him with all this, and he got bhakti also towards the end. So this is the benefit of devotional service. Okay, so he will attain the Supreme Lord in the end, and he will go back to Godhead. So this is the understanding of this chapter, right? So we have completed chapter 8, but I just want to spend a little bit more time. We have a few more minutes. I want to talk about what is devotional service. So at this point, a lot have been talked about devotional service, bhakti, bhakti, bhakti. But what is this bhakti? So it will be described more in later chapters also, because it's still chapter 8, there's still chapter 9, 10, and 11 and 12. But Bhagavad Gita doesn't. It talks about bhakti, but not so much in detail, because it's 700 verses and so many these things are covered. Although the 6 chapters are dedicated to bhakti, the brief things are mentioned, but full descriptions you can find in Srimad Bhagavatam and in other scriptures. So anyway, from here, Srimad Bhagavatam, this chapter, it's the story of Prahlad Maharaj, the Narsinghadev and Prahlad Maharaj's incarnation. So Prahlad, after being saved by Narsinghadev, he offers prayers to Narsinghadev. So this is some of the prayer which he gives. Sri Prahlada Uvacha, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Pada Sevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam, Sakyam Atma Nivedanam. So these are the 9 processes of bhakti. What are the 9 processes? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. So Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. So these are the 9 processes of bhakti. So Shravanam, this is the first thing that we do. And it is a very important process. It is never given up. throughout the 9 processes. So Shravana means to hear, to hear. Simple, very simple. To hear, or it can also be extended to reading, to read and to understand and to hear about the Supreme Lord. So what do we hear? We hear, for example, the Bhagavad Gita. We hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is full of descriptions about activities between the devotees and the Supreme Lord, and full of prayers. So it's very, very nice. Here it shows the picture of Parikshit Maharaj. Now it's described that for each of these 9 processes, there is one famous personality for each of these 9 processes who has perfected his life simply by following this one process alone. So for the process of Shravanam, the personality is Parikshit Maharaj. Now Parikshit Maharaj is a king, and he was destined to die within 7 days. But he was a great devotee king. Actually, he is the grandson of Arjuna, and he was crowned by Yudhishthira Maharaj as the next king after they all retired. And Parikshit Maharaj, that's it's a long story. In level 2, we will talk about the story. So anyway, when he knew that he was going to die, he immediately gave up his kingdom and he went to the banks of the Ganga. And over there, so many personalities all were there. And Sukadev Goswami, this is Sukadev Goswami, he spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. So by hearing this Srimad Bhagavatam, simply by hearing, Parikshit Maharaj attained the supreme abode and he perfected this. So this is Shravanam process. So what is Shravanam? Basically hearing about the Supreme Lord or about his devotees. They are non-different. So chanting is also part of the Shravanam, because when we hear, right, when we chant the holy name, we are also hearing it within our ears. But the second process of the bhakti process is called kirtanam. So kirtanam means chanting or singing or speaking. What are we chanting, singing, or speaking? We chant, sing, or speak God's names, God's pastimes, and nama, rupa, guna, and lila. So these are the kirtanam, the topics which one speaks in kirtanam, Vishnu kirtanam, right, or Krishna kirtanam. So chanting is the predominant important thing. This is something which we will do every day, chanting the names of the Lord, because not every day we may be giving class or we may talk about the pastimes, right? And it can be done, either this chanting can be done with japa, or it can be done in congregation amongst a lot of people, publicly or in the temple. So this is the Yuga Dharma. This is this is the most important amongst all the 9 processes, because it's the Yuga Dharma, the way for us to perfect our lives. And it was introduced by this, especially in Kali Yuga. It was there already in the scriptures, but in Kali Yuga, it was particularly inaugurated by this incarnation of the Supreme Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? And Balaram came as Nityananda Prabhu, and in this way, they pushed this congregation all over the world of chanting the Mahamantra. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pushed it all over India, and Srila Prabhupada, he pushed it all over the world. It was before that, nobody in the world knew about it. But due to Srila Prabhupada, it spread to all over the world through the Hare Krishna movement. Now it is being sung and chanted in every town and village in the world. Almost, we are reaching that point. So the third one is called Vishnu Smaranam. So Vishnu Smaranam means to remember the Lord, to always remember. How can we remember? So remember, this is the point, right? At the time of death, we want to remember. So unless we hear, unless we do Shravanam, hearing about the Lord, and unless we do Kirtanam, it's not possible to have Smaranam, to remember the Lord. So hearing and Kirtan must come. Then only one can remember the Lord constantly. So all right, I forgot to mention just now. The person who perfected his life by Kirtanam is Sukadev Goswami. For example, here in Shravanam, I show you the picture, right? How Parikshit Maharaj, simply by hearing Bhagavatam, he perfected his life. Now, who spoke that Bhagavatam? Sukadev Goswami spoke that Bhagavatam. So by speaking the Bhagavatam, he perfected his life. So therefore, for Shravanam, Parikshit Maharaj, for Kirtanam, Sukadev Goswami is the example. So like that, for Vishnu Smaranam, Prahlad is the example. Prahlad Maharaj. He perfected his life. You remember, Hiranyakashipu was torturing him in different ways. He was put in boiling oil. He was attacked with weapons and snakes. He was thrown from a high place. He was put in the stampede of elephants. He was given poison. He was put in fire. So many things he was done to him. But throughout all these calamities, he was always remembering and taking shelter of the Supreme Lord. So therefore, Vishnu Smaranam, and therefore he was completely protected. No one can hurt him. Nothing could have been done to him. So he perfected. He's the example of Vishnu Smaranam. So these are the three important practices, right, of bhakti yoga or devotional service. There are other processes. I will just very quickly go through them. Just give me 1 minute. We will not go through these in detail in this level 1. We will talk about them in later, right? So but why I stayed with the 3. The most important are the Kirtana, Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Smaranam. Hearing, chanting, and remembering, especially in Kali Yuga. So then there is also Archanam, performing deity worship. So the personality who set the standard for deity worship is Prithu Maharaj. Prithu Maharaj, this is from the Bhagavatam stories. He was one of the persons who set the standard. So elaborate was his deity worship that the Supreme Lord directly accepted. And then we have the 5th one, Pada Sevanam. Pada Sevanam means serving the lotus feet of the Lord. Now, what does serving the lotus feet of the Lord? It can be taken literally, or it can also be taken figuratively. So literally means like Lakshmi Devi. She is the example. Lakshmi Devi is always at the lotus feet of Narayana, right? So she is directly serving literally. Figuratively, it can be understood as someone who is serving the devotees. So people who serve the great acharyas or the great devotees very nicely, they are called Pada Sevanam, attaining their perfection. And then there is Vandanam. Vandanam means prayers, beautiful prayers being offered to the Lord, heartfelt, beautiful prayers being offered to the Lord. So the personality who perfected his life by doing that is Akrura. Akrura is the general of Krishna's army, and he is a relative of Krishna. And Akrura, he was once told to go to Vrindavan to see the gopis, to pass the message to the gopis that Krishna will return. So when Akrura was going, he was constantly remembering the lotus feet of the Lord at every step. It said that at every step he was walking, he was uttering prayers in glorification of the Lord. So that is the process of Vandanam. Another example is Kunti Maharani. Kunti Maharani, she offers very beautiful prayers in the Srimad Bhagavatam, glorification of Krishna. So this is the process of Vandanam, of prayer. Now, then comes the level of Dasyam. Dasyam means to be like the servant of the Supreme Lord, directly, perfect servant. And the example of this is Hanuman. He was the perfect servant of Ramachandra. So like that. And then we have Sakyam. Sakyam is to become a friend, an intimate friend. So this is a very high level. It's not something which can be done at our level. This is at a higher stage. Sakyam. In fact, Dasyam also is a very high level. Sakyam is even higher, to be a friend like Arjuna. How Arjuna served the Supreme Lord as a friend. Or like Sudama, right? This picture here is Sudama. Or like so many other friends that Krishna has and how they served him. And the highest, the last one, the 9th process is called Atma Nivedanam. Now, who is famous about from the Atma Nivedana means one who surrenders his body, mind, and soul simply for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. We already know who this person is, who is famous for Atma Nivedana. We've heard about him in our 2nd chapter. He is none other than Ambarish Maharaj. So Ambarish Maharaj perfected his life by Atma Nivedanam. He dedicated his mind in thinking of Krishna, his words in always glorifying Krishna, his hands in always serving Krishna's deities and in his temple, his ears by always hearing about Krishna, his eyes by always seeing the deities of Krishna, by his touch, by always touching the lotus feet of the pure devotees, by smell, by always smelling the fragrance offered, the flowers and garlands offered to the Lord, his tongue by only eating prasadam and nothing else, his legs by walking all the time and going around the temple, circumambulating the deities and going to holy places, and his head in always performing obeisances, namaskuru, offering dandavat, obeisances, pranams to the deities and to the pure devotees. So in this way, hand, body, mind, and soul, he dedicated his desires for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. So this is Ambarish Maharaj. So there are other devotees like this also. Mother Yashoda is another example. The gopis of Vrindavan are even higher, and topmost amongst all of them is Srimati Radharani. How they are all 100% dedicated to the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. So here, Srimad Bhagavatam, one who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these 9 processes should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. So again, this is corroborating what Bhagavad Gita was also saying, that Bhagavan realization is the highest. And these are the 9 processes of bhakti, right? And further, one more slide to go. So here is a verse where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is an incarnation of Krishna, he says this: of all the different spiritual practices, the 9 forms of bhakti are the best, because they have great potency to deliver Krishna an ecstatic love for him. And he says, of these 9 practices, Nama Sankirtan is the best. To chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the best, because it's the Yuga Dharma, right? Particularly meant for us. But it has to begin first by hearing and chanting, and that would lead to Smaranam, remembering. Because by chanting the holy name without offense, one very easily obtains the priceless treasure of Krishna Prema, the pure love of the Supreme Lord Krishna. And that is the one that will give us complete ananda or bliss. So therefore, chanting or kirtan. So let us end with this. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Let's say this together 3 times. The Hare Krishna Mahamantra 3 times. The Jaya Sri Krishna once. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama Rama
Rama
Rama Hare Hare,
Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna
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 Krishna Hare Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama
Hare Rama,
Rama Rama
Rama
Hare
Rama, Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Thank you for chanting with me. So that's the end for today. So the takeaway is, death is the exam, life is the preparation. Krishna Smaranam is the key to remember Supreme Lord. How? By the 9 processes of bhakti, beginning with hearing, and especially by chanting the holy names of the Lord. And in this way, the bhakti path is like the VIP path back to the Supreme Lord, back to Vaikuntha or to Goloka, the Supreme Lord of the spiritual world. Okay. So any questions from anybody?
Prabhu,
Yes, Prabhuji.
how do you bring youngsters to read or Bhagavad Gita?
Sorry, Prabhu, could you repeat that? How do you?
Yeah, actually, many people want to know something about Bhagavad Gita,
Mm.
but youngsters are not coming inside because the process is a bit long, and the process where you have to give up everything in life and go back to Godhead is difficult for them. So, how do you bring youngsters to
Youngsters,
understand?
oh, okay. Actually, Prabhu, the process is not long. Like you can see, Prahlad Maharaj was 5 years old and he was able to achieve it. So The long process is the dhyana path, is the jnana path. That is the long process. Bhakti path is not the long process. It can be very quickly achieved. Within this one lifetime, it can be achieved. And some people even achieve it very fast. So youngsters here, we have in our temple, what we do is we start them young. So there are, ideally, we should try to give this knowledge to the children when they are young itself by we teach them how to brush teeth, we teach them not to do certain things. So in the same way, we give this knowledge to them. And in that way they will come, and also by engaging them in different services. There are lots of services they enjoy. For example, kirtan. Like if you see some of the videos that I have sent you, the video I sent you today, if you look at it, it's full of young people. So they are engaging themselves like that. So when they are engaging in Krishna service, they will find that other services they are not so interested. And especially when they find friends, when they find association, a clique to join together. So that's the reason Prabhupada made this society, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So there are actually a place where we can have association. Like we want to become devout. If you want to do well in exam, we should have friends who are good in studies, right? We should make friends with those who are good in studies. So that's why people like to go in the same class like that. So in the same way, when we want to be good in devotional service, we should have association amongst devotees. So then we can help each other, we can enthuse each other. And the youngsters also are same thing. We have many programs, like we have cooking programs, and we have a camp, like we have youth program. I'm also one of the teachers in the youth program. We have something where we give youth classes, and this is like from 14 to 20, 17, like that. And we have camping, and we have a lot of programs like that. So it's engagement. We have to think of different ways to engage them, and in this way pass this message. And yeah, so that's how we do it, Prabhu, by association.
My suggestion, I don't know, I may be wrong, my one cent thought.
Mm,
You should just dwell them in jnana yoga,
mm,
so that the first part, before going to the other three parts until karma yoga and all that,
mm.
get them involved in jnana yoga so that they'll understand the basis of Bhagavad Gita.
Well, that same point can also be understood from devotee part, because from the bhakti path, the jnana is also there. It's not that we don't study or we don't hear. That's why it begins with Shravanam. The bhakti path, by following the process of Shravanam, the knowledge is attained. So by hearing, we hear more and more. And then eventually, as we go to the higher levels of bhakti, it is Krishna who will reveal this knowledge to us within the heart. So that will be also mentioned in later chapter. So both processes are fine. It's just that in as I mentioned, in Kali Yuga, the jnana path is not easy. It requires a lot of commitment. And nevertheless, it is also not the recommendation of Krishna. And Krishna himself is suggesting to follow the bhakti path. And it is much more easier. We can see the results also, right?
I'm
So
not,
that's
I'm not saying no for that, but what I'm saying is to get more youngsters. Like it took me 70 years to come into to learn about Bhagavad Gita. So the youngsters want to come, but they're scared. They said, no, they're asking us to do certain things which are not ready yet.
Mm.
So how to get them ready?
So that's the thing, because they have the wrong idea about spiritual life. They think that spiritual life means you cannot enjoy, you cannot let go, so many things you have to do. That's not the idea. So that they have the wrong idea. So that's why we have to reach out to them through various programs. So in our temple, what we do, like right now, we have Bhagavad Gita for children, just like what we are doing now here with adults. We have from ages 7 to from say ages 7 to 12. My son is actually giving one of the classes. He's only 15, but like that we have other people also. My wife is also giving. So for children also, they have 18 days classes, and like that we have even younger children. In our temple, we have something called Gokul Garden, where we engage our students. We give them this information. We tell them how fun it is, how wonderful and happy it is, and they click together amongst their friends, so they don't feel alone. So they don't feel like, oh, it's terrible to be a devotee, or we have to be vegetarian and all that. And So they don't see it that way because they have a clique, you see, and the parents will support them at home, and they have a society where they can come together and have parties. So that's the idea of this International Society of Krishna Consciousness, to
But
create a
how do you
branch.
promote that? How do you promote that to the people?
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem.
Many of us know,
So we
not
have to
many
do,
parents know about this.
yeah, so we have to do marketing. So we are trying to open more and more centers. So we have centers in almost every country, and we are having centers in Malaysia. We have about 27 to 28 centers. So we have to promote this by our example. So we have Radha Yatra festivals, for example, where we attract, we have book distribution, we go around distributing books to people. We have youth. So that's the thing, our marketing needs improvement. We need to present this in the news. And so we need all your help, all your assistance to help us to market these things, to reach out. Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. I bought my first encyclopedia set from you all about 25 or 30 years ago. I
Okay.
never opened it because I did not know the meaning of Bhagavad Gita at that time.
Yes. Even myself, Prabhuji, I didn't know also. Actually, I tell you, I was an atheist when I was growing up. My mother and my family, they brought me up as as a Hindu, but because I didn't understand so many things, I was an atheist. I believed in science. And then when I went to university, there was someone who came to preach to me in the university. There was a class, a Bhagavad Gita class. One of the brahmacharis from the temple used to come to the faculty. And then from there, I heard from him, and then I got attracted. All my questions, everything I asked a lot of questions. In the first class, I asked so many questions. And then he just gave me all the answers so perfectly. I was intrigued. And then I kept on going. And in this way, slowly, with association, I came to this path. So like that, many people. Yeah.
I'm just asking you all to infuse the idea of Bhagavad Gita from childhood. How do you do that?
Yes. Yeah, that can be done. It's actually a long thing to talk about. It begins by the family practicing it. When the family practices it, and when we do it as a family, then that helps tremendously. Like my children, they are 15 and one is 10 years old. So far, good success, I think, I hope. Everything is fine. They are vegetarian, they don't eat meat outside, and they understand also. Even if you give them, they don't want to. And they chant. My son chants about 16 rounds. And my daughter, she's chanting about 6 rounds or so. So like that, it takes step by step. It takes association, a lot of sacrifice on the family. We need to put our effort on the children. That helps. Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. And definitely we need support. And to have a society to support us, it's a big thing. Any other questions from anybody else?
Hi, Prabhu. I got a question here.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. What is your advice for these people who actually read Bhagavad Gita every day? Okay, who chants the mantra like Om Namah Shivaya or Om Sai Ram, and also who are not in Krishna's consciousness, but they think of Krishna, meaning that they read Bhagavad Gita, they listen to Vishnu Sahasranam, they write their mantra, they do their charity. What is the advice for these devotees?
That's wonderful, Mataji. If someone is doing all these things, then it's really wonderful. So Krishna will guide them. Eventually, when Krishna is within our heart, so he sees these people, if they are sincere and they really want to attain the Supreme Lord, Krishna from his heart, he will guide. He will bring them somehow to the right people. He will give them the right association. In some way, it will happen and they will get linked. And once they get linked to a parampara, then they will hear. When they hear more and more, then they will get convinced and they will start following the process strictly. So according to the parampara, and in this way, they will get advancement more and more. So my advice to them would be to definitely hear more, to read more, to question more, to make ourselves convinced about the process, that it works, and to spend our time and our life searching for it. We should not just do other things and say, no, I don't know. We should spend our life looking for these things and praying for the Lord to let these things come. So Lord Shiva will definitely guide us in the right direction. If whoever we pray to, Krishna is within our heart. He says in Gita, whoever we pray to, I make that faith strong in that person. There's one verse in chapter 7 we didn't cover yesterday. So I'll send that verse later. And that person will actually, Krishna sees that sincerity. So my advice is to continue going, and if possible, add the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in their life, and eventually we will understand higher and higher, more and more. We will get convinced.
I would like to share with you something.
Yes.
I'm actually a devotee of Shirdi Sai Baba. So in Sai Sutra, Shirdi Baba, he himself has mentioned that daily reading of Bhagavad Gita is essential, and also daily listening to Vishnu Sahasranam is very powerful. So I just want to share this in a group, you know.
Yes. Yes, Mataji, that's certainly fine. So we have different systems, but according to the Bhagavad Gita, this is the system we are explaining. So based on the Bhagavad, whatever I'm talking today, I'm talking based on the Bhagavad Gita. So for example, Krishna will say in chapter 10, amongst all sacrifices, I am the chanting of the holy name. So if we are following the Bhagavad Gita, if you are reading the Bhagavad Gita, we should not just read the Bhagavad Gita, we should follow what the Bhagavad Gita says as well. So therefore, it's reading, following, and living the Bhagavad Gita. So that's the idea behind this. So that will bring us to a higher level. So that's the idea, Mataji. Any other questions?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. I would say that, you know, after attending the class, and I'm very much interested in your class, I would say that, you know, after listening to each chapter that you are actually sharing with us, I could understand clearly you know, when I read my Bhagavad Gita, I could understand even better.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the kind words. I'm trying only. Any other questions from anyone?
Vanakkam, Prabhu.
Vanakkam,
Prabhu, I feel that the effort to do these online classes for 18 days is highly appreciated. This is one way you are promoting the Krishna actually. I think the parents' effort is very important because the children copy of what we are doing. So, like what I'm doing now for the 18 days, I want to make sure that I don't skip any classes, especially when 7:30, I quickly will increase the volume in my laptop so that even though my children are very busy preparing for their exam, let them listen so they will see me listening to these, the discipline that I practice maybe can motivate them, not now, because probably they also juggling with their balancing their studies and everything. But I'm pretty sure they will copy from the parents. So the parents' role is very important there. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. I 100% agree with you, Mataji. We have to set the right example, and even if they don't follow, you know, teenage life and all that, when they grow up, they may get disturbed, but once their brain settles down, they will again come back to whatever that they have learned when they were young. Anybody else has a question?
Yeah, Prabhu, I think what Ms. Umavati said just now is right. You come from top downwards, parents to the children.
Yes.
You get more parents who get into the system, and they can actually convince the children to what to do about it.
Correct. We have a role. It's actually mentioned in one scripture. There's one place where it said, actually in the Bhagavatam, it said that one should not become a father or a mother or a guru or a leader if one cannot deliver the people under them from the cycle of birth and death. So it's not to say that the idea is that one should take this role very seriously. That it's not just that we have children or we have dependents simply for the sake of having dependents or for enjoying only. So it should be, it's a responsibility. We should do our best to actually help them to go back to understand this, the real purpose of human life.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, on top bottom is better.
Yes, definitely. Bhakti Yoga is all about top bottom. It's from the top. Our parampara, right, comes from the top all the way down. So from like that, it comes down.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. So if there's any other questions, otherwise we can call it a day. So a nice sharing also towards the end. So I'm grateful to all of you spending your time, and also by giving these classes, I'm benefiting a lot. So I'm actually hearing myself, I'm preaching to myself. So thank you very much for all of your
Our
presence.
pleasure. Our pleasure.
Thank you,
Okay.
Prabhu. Thank you so
I'll
much.
see you. So I'll see you.
Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So there's a quiz. We'll put the quiz
Thank you,
later.
Prabhu.
So I'll see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.